Well, hello and welcome to all the Gramophone fans out there and all the stereo fans and home theater fans. I'm Joe with Gramophone, and we are very excited this evening because we're broadcasting live from the Gramophone Experience Center in Timonium, Maryland, and we have got some wonderful guests on tonight. We're hosting SVS, and we've got both Nick Brown, their VP of Marketing, and Gary Yacoubian, the president of SVS, joining us. Nick and Gary, how are you guys doing?
Excellent, Joe. Thank you for having us.
Joe, I hope you're not tired of me. This is like my fourth video I've done with you in the last 2 weeks.
I'll never get tired of being with you, Gary. You're always entertaining. You've got that high energy thing that works every time. Plus, you're way into speakers and subwoofers and the music and movies that drive this whole thing. So that's pretty wonderful too.
And we love great sound and we love music and movies. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, hopefully we never forget what it's really all about, which is the enjoyment of the entertainment. And just to remind everybody in the audience who might be listening just now that we do have a free giveaway a little bit later in the show. So we hope that you're able to stick with us for most of this, what will probably be not quite an hour, but more like about 50 minutes this evening. And Nick and Gary, before we get started in talking about SVS, I would like to hear just a little bit about your own backgrounds and how you got into the business. Obviously, Gary, you and I have known each other for quite a long time, but Nick, if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience members, you know, both how you got into the industry in the first place and then how you found your way to SVS as well.
Absolutely. I'd love to, Joe. First, again, thanks for having us. I've been a big fan of Gramophone for a long time, and I know you guys are one of the iconic AV retailers in the country, so this is a real joy for me to be a part of it. I think, you know, my journey is probably not that unique from a lot of people's. My parents were just huge into music, and they had that, you know, prototypical stereo setup with the record player on top, the dual cassette decks, the, you know, AM FM tuner. And so they were always blasting things like Joan Baez and even, you know, maybe some Cheech and Chong and Bob Seger and just a lot of the, I think, the soundtrack of that era when they were growing up. So I got really sort of immersed in that. And then when I got to college, I fell, I guess you could call it, victim to the big speakers in a white van, which I know a lot of college kids had seen those trolling around campus. And, you know, we just got these out of a big PA system. They're, you know, $500 less than you would normally pay. They really kick butt. And so, you know, my roommate and I were totally like enamored with the idea of having these monstrous PA speakers in our little tiny college dorm apartment. So we ended up investing in those. We love playing our music loud and having some fun. And then from there, I spent some time at a PR agency repping a bunch of different brands like Martin Logan and Krell and some other high-end folks as well, Paradigm. And, you know, that led me to SVS, which really was sort of a dream come true because of just the full ethos, the full brand value, everything they had going on was for me just a dream to step into and to be able to work for a company like that solely as opposed to in an agency setting, you know, really kind of took me where I am today.
Well, that's awesome. And first off, I think it's hilarious that you got into this business and you first owned some speakers bought out of the back of a van, because certainly those guys were very aggressive in the way that they marketed their products. But also your comments about joining SVS, there probably are a fair number of the audience members who don't know that SVS is one of the fastest growing speaker companies in the entire audio business. And you know, really, it's a true testament to the energy that you guys have brought to everything you do in product design and marketing and so forth, that you are one of the fastest growing companies out there. So thanks, Nick, for sharing that little bit about yourself. And Gary, I know you pretty well, but maybe some of the audience members don't. So if you don't mind also sharing a little bit about yourself.
Well, I think the first thing I want to share, first of all, thank you. The first thing I want to share is my enthusiasm and happiness that we're finally in partnership with Gramophone, because I'm from the DC area. In fact, I started in this industry in retail, and we never competed with Gramophone, which is probably a good thing, or you guys probably wouldn't have me on your show. But we were in Washington, in the Washington area, and Gramophone at that time was only in Baltimore. Now you're also in Washington. And I just had such a great admiration for Gramophone, for the professionalism. It's just an amazing organization, and has been reinforced over and over again as we've started our partnership and now moved into really being partners. So thrilled to be here. I've been in this space pretty much my whole professional career. Started, as I said, in retail, but for the last 15 years, I've been in manufacturing. So I kind of have the benefit of understanding a bit how people think and what they want, and but also develop some expertise in creating great sound for people, and that has been really a joyful experience. We've created, and Nick is modest. He's been a huge part of why we're a fast-growing brand. We've created a brand that brings great sound to more and more people, to people that maybe wouldn't have considered it in their living space in the past. So really, really excited to be doing this and to be in partnership with a professional, awesome organization like Gramophone.
Well, that sounds wonderful, and right back at you, of course. We were attracted to SVS for a long time, but certainly the way that you guys have grown your business over the last several years really motivated us to want to be, a part of your energy and a part of what you guys are doing. So that's all great stuff. Just to mention, we're starting to get some comments, by the way. Mike comments, I love the big white van story. And so it's good to see that the audience members are starting to chime in as well. I'm going to try and turn down my audio just a little bit because apparently we're getting just a little bit of echo. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Beautiful. Well, if it works for you guys, and again, since we're all excited to be doing business together, maybe, Nick, we can shift the next question or start the questioning off with you a little bit in terms of talking about the Prime Wireless Pro sound base, which was honestly a product that really wasn't on my radar until you talked about it in our notes for getting ready for tonight's broadcast. And once I started looking at it, I was blinking a lot because of everything I was seeing on the page. So maybe you can share with us just a little bit about this award-winning product as a way for us to start talking about SVS.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's actually a pretty proud moment for us. There's these awards that are given out yearly called the ISA Awards. It stands for the Expert Imaging and Sound Association, and it's a group of 60 to 70 AV reviewers and media from around the world, and they all get together and review some
magazines.
Sorry?
The full magazine, not just the reviewers.
Yeah, they're full media outlets from around the world, and they basically choose multiple categories and vote on the best product in each category every single year. And it's awesome. SVS has won actually 7 years in a row now with Soundbase, but this one in the integrated amplifier category. And for us, it was just an amazing testament to what we're doing in the wireless audio category. I mean, we've won for subwoofers, we've won for our Prime Pinnacle Tower speakers, and we even won last year for the Prime Wireless Pro powered speaker pair. But for the Soundbase to win our first component was just truly I thought it was one of the greatest accomplishments since I've been here because of just some of the things that were said about it. It's a 300 watt stereo integrated amplifier that can stream in high res. So 24-bit 192 kilohertz DAC. It gets you full high resolution from all of the high res streaming services. It's got a world of connectivity on the back. Whether you want to use HDMI directly to your TV, line level inputs for various components. For wireless streaming, you can do AirPlay 2, which is basically CD quality for anyone with an Apple phone can just directly connect to this and start streaming. Chromecast for anyone with an Android device can get that same functionality. And of course, Bluetooth for those folks who want the easiest path to connection, don't mind a little compression. It's available too. But, what we're really trying to create with this device was just an amazingly versatile product that sounds amazing and can drive anything from like bookshelf speakers you see there to full range towers. And I think these judges from around the world saw the value that it was bringing to the category, and that's why we were able to take home another ISA this year. And again, it was just a really proud achievement for our company. I know that.
Nick, because of my own background in manufacturing, and I've spent more of my life in manufacturing for sure than I have in retail, but really manufacturing speakers and also, of course, the wonderful subwoofers that you do. is really a very different thing than manufacturing electronics. They're obviously related in the fact that a place like Gramophone will sell both, but on the manufacturing level, they're two different animals. And the fact that SVS's first product, first real foray like this into an electronics component was able to win an ESO award, I'm really blown away by that, because there are manufacturers who've been at this for 20 years manufacturing electronics who haven't won an ESO award. So really kudos to you. And if there's anything you can share with us and with our listeners about the journey that you guys were on to bring this thing to market, that might be interesting.
Gary does a great job of sort of framing up what Prime Wireless Pro is all about as far as, engaging what we consider an untapped market. So maybe Gary can start and I can riff off what he says.
Sure.
Well, let me talk about the ISO award first, because it's something that I'm really proud of. And it is 60 plus magazines around the world. And I know it doesn't automatically ring a bell in the US because there's 60 magazines around the world. 2 of them are in the US, Stereophile and Sound and Vision. But remember, Nick, when we first won 7 years ago, we won for our at the time flagship subwoofer, and actually it still is SV16 Ultra. That was our first ISO award, and what I found amazing then was that the ISO award was usually given to some mega expensive, super high end, high performance product. And we were viewed as, how does something that affordable win the best subwoofer of the year? And it's not that affordable. It's a couple $1,000s a plus. But in that world of super expensive high-end audio, it was a shock to people, the level of performance that it had. And we kept bringing reference performance and subwoofers down to more affordable price ranges. And so we, as time went on, became the #1 subwoofer in the world. What Nick is talking about and what became really gratifying for us was when our speakers started to win as well. Our Prime Pinnacle Tower speakers won last year. Our Prime Wireless, the speaker version of Prime Wireless Soundbase, our Prime Wireless powered speaker pair won. And now this is our first component to win this award. Really incredibly gratifying as we, moved from being basically with Nick along the way and our incredible product development team from being a really top range subwoofer brand into one of the top 5 speaker brands in the world, and now even our component one. So it's incredibly gratifying, and that story to me is one of the most exciting things that's happened in my professional life. As far as Prime Wireless Pro goes, Nick's right. I mean, we sort of said to ourselves, look, this category of wireless audio has been relegated to the world of, you and I talked about this, Joe. Basically, background music, sound that you hear, but you're basically kind of ignoring it. It's below the surface. It's not there to be convincing. It's not an audiophile experience. It's not there to immerse you and make you feel like you're right there with hearing the music or the movie as the artist intended. And we said to ourselves, what if we made all that same connectivity? What if we had all that same ease of convenience of connectivity and control, as Nick described, but bring it to a level of performance that's not been seen in this space? And that's what Prime Wireless Pro Soundbase is, and that's what Prime Wireless Pro Powered Speaker Pair is. It's basically bringing convincing, immersive, audiophile sound to the smart speaker and smart wireless space.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting, your distinction between people who are listening to music as sort of audio wallpaper, if you will, just something background to kind of fill in the gaps between what they're doing and, versus somebody who's actually watching a movie or listening to music and wants to hear it the way the artist, the musician, the director, the way they intended, right?
Yeah, 100%.
No doubt.
I mean, what we think that there's I think a lot of people are not told that they can have immersive, convincing sound in their living space. It's viewed as something that, the quote unquote and Nick can talk to this if you want him to, Joe. He does a really good job talking about the modern audiophile. We believe the modern audiophile listens to music however they want to, wherever they want to, with whatever content they prefer. Nick, anything you want to say about that?
No, absolutely. I think we came up with this term, the modern audiophile, because one of our big missions is to try to get more people to do the math that they can have these amazing, immersive, whether it's music, home theater, gaming, whatever they're into from a content perspective, they can have these just amazingly dynamic and deep and just really meaningful audio experiences that complement any kind of content that they're really into. And, one of the things that struck me the most when some of the reviews of Prime Wireless Pro started to hit was just how much fun people were having playing with it, and it's like there was a time, and I still think it exists for some people, where playing a vinyl record or sort of that tactile experience brings them a lot of pleasure, and listening to an album all the way through. I definitely think this is sort of a modern version of that, and I'll use my son as an example. He's in college, and I sent him off with a pair of the Prime Wireless Pro powered speakers. And, he goes there and they have these listening parties where they just pass around a phone and everyone picks a song and you sort of have this playlist going, and he's got a little 3,000 micro subwoofer to go with it. And they're hearing details and definition and sounds that they've never heard from tracks they've listened to hundreds and hundreds of times. And I think that really has an impact on somebody younger to be able to understand what they've been missing, and, to have it broadcast in high res, and to be able to get that level of detail at a price that, maybe not on every college student's budget. It's something they can aspire to own maybe a little bit more easily than a, $10,000 pair of tower speakers. That's really powerful. So we really embrace that mission of trying to get people to understand, what they're missing, what they can truly get on a daily basis, the kind of joy, the kind of pleasure from these kind of products. And again, they have to be geared towards their listening habits, and that includes a smartphone. So I think that was part and parcel to what we did here, was make sure that all you need is a smartphone. You don't need anything else. You don't need a stack of equipment. You don't need a pile of CDs. Like, that's it. And I think that really resonated with people, and that's why these awards have been so meaningful to us.
Well, that's great to hear. You've also touched on something when you talked about the modern audiophile that I think is worth exploring just a little bit, because the folks over at Qobuz, David Solomon, our pal, the guys at Tidal, I think they have brought something that really has never existed before. Go back 20 years or so to what guys in stereo stores, places like ours, were saying about streaming back then. We were all kind of speaking this language of, like scoffing at it. Well, that streaming stuff, I guess it gives you music, but it sure isn't high fidelity. Well, on the one hand, that was true. But on the other hand, the staggering numbers of human beings who embraced streaming, who wanted easy, convenient access to their music, I think sort of created a situation in which the inevitable result was to have, folks like Qobuz and Tidal coming along with high resolution streaming, because people wanted that convenience. But as you're talking about, Gary and Nick, there's an audiophile too who says, okay, the convenience is great, but I want it to sound great. And what SVS is doing right now with your approach to electronics is you're really integrating those things for people, and frankly at prices that folks can afford. Because as much as I love to open an audio magazine and drool over an $80,000 monoblock amplifier, even a guy like me in the business, I'm not going to buy it. I mean, it's just something that you sort of lust after, right? So, being able to have products that you guys sell that are affordable to a lot of people and sound great, it's a tremendous achievement.
We kind of said, if somebody loved what we do, if somebody aspires to great sound, they deserve to get that great sound. It seems really kind of sad if you people are going to these consumer audio shows, which we participate in a lot of them. Nick can talk about this as well. And they're going around and they're hearing exactly what you're talking about: $100,000 monoblocks and $80,000 a pair of speakers, and they kind of get to our room and we're like, okay, where were you last? And they heard $80,000 speakers, and we're like, okay, did you enjoy them? Yeah. And are you in the market for those? Not really. No, not really. Well, here's an experience that's we like to think is close to that. Sometimes in some ways, right there with it. I won't say better. And yet a normal person can afford to have that in their living space. That's pretty important and part
Yeah,
of our
and,
mission.
I would take it even a step further. I think with our full product line, we have close to 20 different subwoofers available. But one of the great things about SVS is if you go with what I'll call our entry level, which is nothing entry level about it, our SB1000 Pro, you're not making any compromises whatsoever. You're getting the same fidelity. You're getting the smartphone app experience. You're getting that same level of depth and output, just in a smaller form factor for maybe a smaller room where your listening preferences are a little bit different than somebody who's in the market for 16 Ultra flagship subwoofer. And that's so critical to what we're doing within our industry, is just trying to create solutions for people no matter where you fall within your budget and your room size, but never having to make a compromise on the experience, even if you're going with the least expensive model.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. In fact, if you don't mind, Nick, just talk a little bit more about speakers, because you guys have done a tremendous job in that category, both, the wireless speakers that incorporate streaming, but also just your regular speakers. So if you don't mind just spending a few minutes talking about that, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the highest level, what we've really tried to do with our speakers is to create, both audiophile refinement. So qualities that people who are really, hardcore into music and love to do that sort of critical listening, but not sacrifice sort of the big home theater dynamics, the bass, the energy, the performance qualities that can allow you to really immerse yourself in a home theater / cinematic experience. I right from our Ultra Series speakers, they came out of the gate and were just incredibly well received. I mean, I think Gary says there's a ton of subwoofer brands that are littered, or the industry is littered with subwoofer brands that tried to make speakers and speaker brands that tried to make
Don't work for one of them. Don't work for one of them.
So, we didn't want to be that. We wanted to create an experience that was like, oh, these things are all bass and like, yeah, they're great for watching, Edge of Tomorrow, but I'm never going to put it on with my Diana Krall or my Eagles. And that was, critical for, our design and engineering team to hit that sweet spot, no pun intended, of, making sure you could walk and straddle on both sides of the fence and have that experience. We came out with our Prime series after that, and much like we do with our subwoofers, we used a lot of that flagship technology from the Ultra, trickled it down to the Prime series so you could get that level of performance that was the lion's share of Ultra series, but just at a more affordable price point. And then we came out with Pinnacle.
Can I break in just one thing, because you did say something really interesting there, and a lot of people don't know the backstory of what you're talking about. And Joe, you might dispute this because you did work once upon a time at Velodyne, but I remember when David Hall first showed us the Velodyne full range speakers, and Velodyne, for those who don't know, is a subwoofer company, or was a subwoofer company. And he said, these are perfect speakers, and you're going to love these because they're perfect. I won't get into whether they were perfect or not, other than just, they didn't end up being very successful. But it really did remind me, engineers who are really good at designing subwoofers, if you ask them, could you do speakers? They're like, oh, totally. I totally could, and I will. And I'm sure they use the same engineering expertise that they had already for subwoofers to make speakers. Guess what? Same thing happens in reverse with speaker brands. They're like, oh, come on, I make speakers. They do all the frequency ranges. Of course I can design subwoofers. And they use designers or engineers who are focused on speaker design, and then tell them, now go make us a subwoofer. We need to sell subwoofers with our speakers. And what ends up happening is you get a subwoofer that isn't capable of delivering, doing the 5 really important performance attributes that we look for in a great subwoofer. I can go into that at some point or not, but main thing to say is we have 2 completely separate engineering teams, and one of the engineering teams focuses on subwoofer excellence. The other engineering team focuses on full range speaker excellence. And in fact, we have a completely different team that works with our smart wireless ecosystem. And the reason is that you can't be an expert on everything. You're going to end up being good at some things and not so great at others. And we knew that if we wanted to make the jump from being a great subwoofer brand to being a great audio brand, we needed to have engineers and designers who were expert in speakers, in components, in wireless technology. So, to your point, Nick, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, Gary, I'm going to want to hear about the 5 things, the 5 characteristics in just a moment. But if you don't mind, we're going to take a couple questions from the audience. First off, John Doe says, I turned vinyl to CDR. And he also says, my 2006 Dodge Sprinter van came with a cassette. So, but here's an actual question. Let's see. Bodie looks like, Billy P says, any chance of an Ultra bookshelf refresh? And I hadn't even thought about that question. So if you wouldn't mind commenting on it just a little bit.
Bodie, we could tell you, but then we would have to shoot you. These are deep, dark secrets. I will say this, look, we're an extremely energetic and forward-facing company. And so we're constantly looking to grow and refresh. And that is, everything we do is constantly under scrutiny so that we can push the envelope and do better. So, I mean, I can say that yes, these things are all being looked at, and we're constantly in the product development phase of our. We're not just, and I actually was talking to one of my counterparts, like, hey, this is a tough economy for speakers and stuff like that. So we're just not doing any engineering. We're just going to sell the same stuff until things get better. We are so not in that mode. We are absolutely charging forward. We'll have lots of interesting product launches, new technologies to share as early as next year.
Good. And I think it is difficult sometimes for folks to grasp that as much as a company may realize, hey, we'd like to do this or we'd like to do that, if you're a dedicated, high-quality company like SVS, you're not going to bring that product out until it's ready. You might want to have it ready for, the fall selling season of next year or whatever is your benchmark for when you want to have it hit the market. But there's always that critical point where maybe it's 6 months or so before the product is supposed to ship, where you ask the engineers, hey, is this thing, do you really believe it's going to be ready? And if it's not, a conscientious company makes the decision to keep working on it because you don't want to bring it out until it's what you believe it can be, right?
I'm notorious for being late. We also are notorious for being perfectionists. We don't bring things out until they are exactly right.
Mm-hmm. One of the friends of mine who was rep many high quality brands said about one of his brands, the best thing about them is how focused they are on having the product be right. And the worst thing about them is the fact that they're so focused on having the product be ready, because it could easily be a year or two after when they think they're going to bring it to market. But he said the good news about all of that is when it hits the market, it's right. And I think that's really, really important.
We try not to talk about it until it's actually in the market, which I have worked in companies, especially one I won't name, that was famous for talking about products for literally years before they were a reality. And we're super careful not to do that.
Yeah. When I was a rep, my mantra was, if the product isn't on the water, just about to hit our shores, we're not talking about it, because that's just going to get you in trouble. Well, thank you for what we've done so far. If you don't mind us shifting gears just a little bit, Gary, you're 100% right that it's really difficult to be a good speaker company and a good subwoofer company. Almost nobody can do it. And in fact, I was kind of proud of the fact that during most of my time at Velodyne, part of our big success was that there was a complete stoppage of trying to do speakers because we were focused on what we were good at. That's important. The fact that you guys are doing both very successfully, winning awards doing both, is really impressive. But if we can now, let's talk just a little bit about the subwoofers. And, Nick, I got all excited when Gary and I were going to do a video about the 3000, the Micro 3000, because I know in particular how hard it is. It's hard to make a good subwoofer, period. It's just a big engineering challenge. But to make a good compact subwoofer, like, that's double hard, right? And to make a good compact subwoofer at a reasonable price, well, then that ups the chunk factor even more in terms of how challenging it can be. So maybe we can talk a little bit about 3000 micro and 3000 in wall, because that's truly, for some customers, the right thing to do is get it out of the way entirely so that you don't see any box, even one as compact as 3000 micro.
Speaking of late, 3000 in wall was 2 years late, and the reason was our belief that we're not going to launch an in wall subwoofer unless it fully is an SVS subwoofer and truly a subwoofer and not an imposter. And that's a really, really difficult challenge because exactly of what you said, Joe. A subwoofer and any speaker is a piston that moves air, but the part of the frequency range that requires the most motion of air is bass, as you well know. And so in order to move air, you need amplifier power, you need driver phone what's the word, my area, and then but you also need cabinet volume, and achieving all three, a combination of all three of those things in an in-wall subwoofer is a massive engineering challenge. I'm so proud of what the team accomplished, because 3000 in-wall is a total beast. It is capable of bass response that is below the threshold of audibility, meaning it creates bass that's so deep you can't hear it, but you can only feel it. And it does it at volume levels capable of working with a full-on home theater, or it can be matched up with in-ceiling or in-wall speakers, which is the typical application for an in-wall subwoofer.
Yeah, the challenge of doing an in-wall subwoofer that sounds really great is multiplied by the fact that not only is that a compact space that you've got in between those joists, but you're now attaching it to sheetrock. So let's think for just a moment about all of the greatest speakers we've ever heard where the cabinet is built out of sheetrock. Oh, that doesn't exist, because sheetrock's not a great material to build a speaker cabinet out of. It flexes like crazy versus, something like, thank you very much, Nick, for putting up this this picture of the of the 3000 micro, because yeah, that's a really rugged cabinet. So in fact, take it away, Nick. Sorry about trampling on your space there, inviting you to speak and then rattling off myself.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to make sure we could show it. And I have another shot here that shows its perspective next to one of our bigger, our largest subwoofer, the PB16 Ultra, which I think it's a good segue for Gary to talk a little bit about, again, the 5 things that make a subwoofer truly special. But, for me, the best story about the micro was we brought it to a dealer event that we had, and, we were playing it in a demo room where they had sampled all sorts of different subwoofers in there. And we had somebody come from the room 2 doors over and was like, oh, is that the new PB4000 or PB4000? We finally got those installed. I'm like, no, it's that one little micro subwoofer over there. And it was just sort of this jaw on the floor type moment. And we've done that now. We do this quote unquote magic trick with a lot of the events that we go to, because it's we'll have the bigger subwoofer in the room, and then we'll have the micro sort of stashed over in the corner, because it is small. You can put it inside furniture, literally. And,
sure.
People are just blown away. And it's become such a darling of audiophiles, too, because of what, like Gary was saying, it's so tight. It's so musical. It matches up perfectly with electrostats and, the different kind of speakers that are renowned for being just really, really quick. Yet it can still punch down to about that 20 hertz region, which, again, with room gain even, it can even get below that. And it's just, it's a magic trick.
Stunning. So you take the floor a little bit now, if you would, Nick, with, I'm eager to hear anything further you have to say about the micro, but also about the in-wall.
Oh, the in-wall. Let me get a shot of the in-wall up here too. I mean, This was based on the same 3000 technology that, went into the micro, went into our SB3000s, which has really become one of our most popular subwoofers that we've ever made. And I mean, I think the design that went into it with the drivers, they're just, absolutely bulletproof. And the amplifier power that you're able to push through these with the split wind edge wound voice coil, which is a really unique design from our engineer Smith Freeman, has just allowed us to get a level of output for typical form factors that you just weren't able to see before. And then, to have on top of that the app control and some of the other features that it has, I mean, it provides a truly awesome user experience, which I think is underrated a lot of times from folks who are sort of into this tractor pull mentality with subwoofers. Well, how low can they play and how loud can they play? It offers all the benefits of a subwoofer, which Gary can go through in terms of the sonics, but also just a really awesome user experience with the app and with the ability to completely hide it in the room, and in the 3000 micros case, almost hide it in the room, depending on what space you have in furniture and elsewhere. So, I would like to think that we are truly innovating in the world of subwoofers, even now in these categories that have existed for a long time, but we're still bringing some fresh technology and some experiences that I don't think have existed prior to when we tackled them.
Absolutely. Anything further from you on that one, Gary?
Well, I wanted to rip off one thing you said, Joe, which is about the sheetrock. You're right. You and a lot of in-wall subwoofers try to use the actual wall as a cabinet. The problem with that is, as you said, it's not an ideal cabinet material. That's true. Secondly, if you're using the wall as a cabinet, then the person on the side of the wall that wants to hear the bass is going to hear it, but also the person on the other side of the wall who doesn't want to hear the bass is going to hear it. And that's not an ideal situation. So what we did, and we knew we were going to do this from the jump, it's dual active 9-inch drivers. So there's not typically in an in-wall subwoofer, they have an active and a passive. The problem with, meaning there's a driver that's hooked up and another one that isn't, that's a cost saving measure. And the reason they do it is basically to cut costs. And the negative of that is you've basically got one driver that's moving according to the content, and the other one is pacing it, and that makes it very muddy. So they're dual active 9-inch drivers in a completely acoustically sealed chamber of its own. It's perfect in and of itself, in the sense that you can mount it in a wall, or if you wanted to, you could literally put it on the floor under a sofa or behind the sofa, because it's a completely acoustically sealed chamber. And it's a front firing, two front firing active 9-inch drivers, meaning only the person who's supposed to hear the bass is going to hear the bass. For the most part, people elsewhere in the house, or obviously neighbors, are not going to hear what you don't want them to hear or what they don't want to hear. The other piece is, yes, you need a super powerful amplifier, and the 3000 series amplifier that drives that subwoofer is 800 watts of continuous power, more than 2,500 watts of peak power. That's unprecedented in any subwoofer, let alone an in-wall subwoofer. And by the way, that's not even our most powerful amplifier.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Less important for some of the folks who are tuning in, but it is also easily installed, whether that's with new construction or an existing room. And that was important because I think one of the drawbacks of in-wall subwoofers has been they are pretty difficult to install, or they can take up sort of a lot of space and create their own issues just by having them put in. So we had you in mind too there, Joe, and Gramophone, for the folks that need to have these in different spaces, sometimes difficult spaces, and that was a big consideration for our engineering team.
No, it's very much appreciated, because as Gary and I said in the video that we made, there are so many installs that happen every year all throughout the country that not just here, but that get no subwoofer whatsoever, because there's no easy place to put one. And being able to conceal a subwoofer with a lot of output and musicality on top of it, that's a game changer for a lot of people. Speaking of another game changer, and again, with all the background I've had in this industry in subwoofers, I'd like for you guys just to touch a little bit on something that, Gary, you and I didn't delve into too deeply when we talked about the 3000 micro, but that I think is mind-bogglingly good. I've read on the forums about how many people are impressed when they start using the app that you have for being able to dial in that subwoofer, because as I've said to so many people, one of the most misunderstood products in the marketplace is a subwoofer. For example, you get a subwoofer, you place it where you think it should go, you start dialing in the volume control, and you can hear it go louder or softer. You move over to the phase control. If you're standing there at the subwoofer, but your easy chair, your comfortable place where you always listen to music is here, what you're doing in twisting the dial of the phase control back and forth is completely undetectable in terms of what's happening over here. So the fact that you guys have created an app where somebody can sit down in their preferred listening position and start dialing the subwoofer in, I think that's massive. So if you wouldn't mind just spending a little bit of time talking about that.
Yeah, I think, well, look, most subwoofers, I'm going to say in the 90+%, make you look at a display that's on the back of the subwoofer because you don't want to light up the front of the subwoofer because it's distracting when you're actually listening to it. So the displays are usually on the back. And so you have to figure out how to bend over, read the back of the subwoofer, and figure out what it's saying upside down because you're looking one way and the thing is facing the other way. So no fun. And to your point, Joe, you're not in the listening position.
That's
so
right.
we created this app that is Bluetooth connected, meaning if the subwoofer is not line of sight, it will still connect to the subwoofer. It is bidirectional. So that means that if you see something on the app that you're doing, that means the subwoofer is doing it. So you have confirmation that the adjustments you're making are right there happening in real time on the subwoofer, or you wouldn't see it on the app. And it's really fun to use. We have a smartphone, an Apple iPhone version and an Android version. So pretty much not pretty much, every phone out there can use our app. You can, if you're really into this stuff, you can adjust that subwoofer down to the molecular level. But maybe not. Maybe you're not so into it that you want to do all those different things like continuously variable phase, polarity. It's got a parametric equalizer. You can adjust the slope of the crossover. Yeah, you can do all those things, but not everybody wants to do that. It also has some really cool, just simple, basic, fun-to-use features like 3 custom presets for your subwoofer. So, for example, you could have a movie preset for like really exciting, dynamic, more in-your-face bass, and then a music preset for the more accurate and gentle bass to suit music. And then you could even have maybe a quiet mode for when other people in the household are sleeping so that it's not overly shaking the house during late night enjoyment of content. So just the presets alone for the person that doesn't want to delve into the molecular level of subwoofer control or the volume control. In fact, I like to say that the app is more there to solve room problems than if you don't have any problems, you don't need to use it other than to adjust the volume and play with the presets. But if you are one of those kind of people who likes to tinker, it's a dream. It's really fun. You can adjust any number of things. And since you're sitting in the listening position, you can hear in real time what you just did.
Yeah, Gary mentioned the fun aspect. I mean, that to me is one element that, I'll sit here and we know different streaming services, they mix their movies different. Some people say Disney's are undermixed or they're not hot enough in the bass. I can sit there and play around and be like, I'm just not getting punched hard enough here. So I can make those adjustments, which, again, it adds to sort of the user experience and just having enjoyment with these products that you invest in. But then beyond that, we've definitely noticed an uptick in just how much interest people have taken in DSP and subwoofer digital signal processing and just trying to learn the ins and outs of it and what's possible. And, it's been certainly a real benefit to see a lot of different folks, whether it's on YouTube or even in our customer base, just embracing this level of, like Gary was saying, molecular updates that you can make to just squeak that last little bit of performance or get it that much better blended with your speakers. And to me, I take a lot of pleasure out of that because, again, it just adds to the hobby and it makes it that much more encouraging for people to pass that knowledge on to the next person.
Well, and you've also, Nick, referred to something as you were speaking that I think probably many audience members really don't quite understand, and that is the massive influence on how this pair of speakers and that subwoofer and all that sort of thing, your whole system will sound, I don't want to say completely different, but will sound significantly different if you were to suddenly just pack it all up in the den where you're listening to it nowadays and put it in your living room or put it in your basement or put it in your bedroom, because the room itself has a big influence on the sound of what you hear. And to me, I think when I discovered the secret of getting almost any room to sound really good in the bottom end, simply adding a second subwoofer, it is mind-blowing when you put on a really good quality sub, let's say, for example, a 3000 micro, and you walk around the room, because you will hear parts of the room where the bass sounds wonderful, hear parts of the room where it sounds over-exaggerated, and hear other parts of the room where, no fault of your system, no fault of the products, you're getting cancellations, and all of a sudden, the bass level is literally, 15 dB down from when you were standing over here. So, maybe we can talk just a little bit about twin subwoofers and the massive difference that can make in a room.
Yeah, what you're talking about is room node, and what it means is at some places in the room the bass is going to be right, but because the sound waves that are in the lower frequencies are so long, there is the ability for them to literally bounce off walls and cancel each other out, or bounce off walls and reinforce each other. So what happens is, in certain parts of the room, the sound is correct. In other parts of the room, the sound it's almost like, where did the bass go? Because the sound waves are literally canceling each other out. In other parts of the room, the sound waves are sort of doubling up because they're not out of phase, but they're bouncing off the wall and reinforcing each other. Now you're hearing too much bass. If you have dual subwoofers, then 80% of those kinds of issues go away, literally 80%, which means probably all of them, because most rooms have limited problems. But your budget doubles, right? Except no. What we recommend is cut your budget in half for the single subwoofer and just get two, and that will eliminate 80% of the room nodes.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I would add on to that too is, I think when you have your subwoofers blended perfectly with your speakers, it sounds like they're creating bass for every speaker in your system. And, we have this extreme example on screen now, but that notion of localization, where it's like, I can tell the subwoofers in that corner, it takes away a little bit from the immersive impact. And that, almost vanishes when you have dual subwoofers and you have them all blended perfectly with the speakers. And, I think there's just another benefit there, whether you are running two smaller ones or one larger one. And in some cases, it's actually easier to place two smaller subwoofers, because again, you have certain parts of the room that maybe it doesn't disrupt the traffic flow, whereas you have two massive ported subwoofers, it may or a single massive ported subwoofer, it may be a little bit more cumbersome to fit within your living space.
I love it. So Gary, we're at the 6:20 mark, and I know that you have another commitment this evening. You may need to drop off soon. I want to thank you for participating with us, and stay on for as long as you can. But certainly, Nick, I want to make sure we get on to a couple of other things that we laid out that we wanted to cover tonight. I loved it that you wanted to talk about favorite demo content and the art of the demo, because how many times have you gone to an audio show and wandered into some room with, 6 figures worth of gear, and they're playing something where you think, who would ever listen to this? So if you can talk a little bit about favorite demo content, I would think our audience members would appreciate that too.
Well, Larry, or Gary, that little Freudian slip there with the Larry. Gary, maybe you kick off, since I know you got to jump out of here, and I can take us home.
Well, we have there's two kinds of demos. First of all, there's the demos that we use when we're voicing speakers and subwoofers. Those are really important, and you get really tired of hearing them over and over again, but they are powerful tools to evaluate products and bring them to their highest level of excellence. And then there are demos that just underscore the possibilities of systems, and we have some of those as well. And actually, you're right, Larry Magoo, our national training manager, who does our happy hours. This is kind of a happy hour. Hopefully, you're happy, Joe, with this happy hour. He's always picking content that we use. I will say this from a general place. when you should in evaluating your system, you've got home theater evaluations and stereo evaluations. I would recommend pick movies and music that you're very familiar with, that you've heard sound its best, and then use that content to evaluate your own system and make sure it sounds its best. If it doesn't, there are lots of ways to adjust that. I know the team at Gramophone is experts in things like that, as are we. As far as my favorite demos, I'm trying to think now. Now I'm a little bit drawing a blank. I always use so believe it or not, this is going to sound very dry. I always use solo cello. Bach cello suites is one. I have a couple of recordings I use. Everybody knows Yo-Yo Ma. He just released one that sounds really, really good. That's a great way to evaluate full range speakers and subwoofers. We also use jazz, of course. I like to use jazz with acoustic bass and with acoustic instruments. And actually, some of the vintage Miles Davis recordings from the 60s are really well recorded and can show the possibilities of a great sound system.
You didn't
Lastly,
mention
we like
Billie Eilish.
it's funny you say that. I was just going to say, I believe female voice is another really, really important one. Billie Eilish is not recorded in what I would call a classic audiophile fashion, but they're very focused on sound, and they definitely will test your system. I think Norah Jones, which is a classic audio demo, is an excellent one to use, and you can get Norah Jones in high res. I'm trying to think what other demos. Nick, refresh my memory. There,
Yeah, Marion Hill is the new female vocalist that we've been really heavy into recently. She's just got a phenomenal set of pipes and just, has a very silky, smooth voice that's very, very revealing of what speakers can do. But then we like to, we'll have some Daft Punk. We'll have some other things too that, we think people are actually going to listen to. We play a track from Rammstein, which is all heavy metal. So, you got to have some sort of cross-genre selections that you can entertain people with, because you don't necessarily know that they're into the Eagles or Diana Krall or whatever. It's like, let's play something that they've heard before, or that shows off a certain aspect of our speakers that they wouldn't hear from a Norah Jones or Marion Hill.
I love it that you guys are using vocal and female voice in particular for that. Paul DiComo, God rest his soul, used to say all the time, if a speaker can't get the human voice right, it really doesn't matter how smoothly extended the top end is or how much bass the speaker can produce for the money. If you can't get the mid-range where most material really lives, if you can't get that right, it's not a speaker worth buying. And I agreed with him and have ever since he first mentioned that to me 30 years ago. Since we're drawing closer to our time when we've got to wrap this up, Nick, if you don't mind just spending a little bit of time, I think your charitable work with the Washington Performing Arts Organization is something we really want to hear about before we close it out.
So this is something I'm just supremely proud of. And Gary lives in the DC area, and we're very active around that area supporting the Washington Performing Arts. But one of the things we were able to do last year was work with them to get some of the underserved classrooms around the area, specifically music programs, some of our speakers, so they could let their students hear, what instruments actually sounded like. A lot of them were using Alexa Dots or, even lesser speakers than that. And so they had this whole sort of event where they loaded up a bunch of SVS speakers, went around to these different schools, were putting them in the classrooms. And, some of the reactions from the teachers were just they were like heart melting in a way that it makes you feel really good about getting up and going to work, every day in and day out. And to see the passion on the teacher's face, but then see the kids hear what an oboe sounds like, for the first time, or a didgeridoo, or hear this track that they've been listening to from, a really just not very good sound system, to now have the full dynamics and the bass and understand what it means to be full range. It just meant a lot for us to be a part of that. And, I know Gary can share some thoughts about it too, but to me, that was the most rewarding part, was just to see some of these classrooms where they just don't get the funding that they need. So for us to be able to do a little part to help them experience music in a way that they never had, just meant a lot.
No, I think that's fabulous. And anybody who's involved in some charitable work like that is great. but in the business world, so rarely do you see somebody take the time to talk about that kind of work. And so, as we were exchanging ideas for this evening's session, I loved it that you put that in there and really wanted to touch on that as well. So we're just about done with our time here. Several things I want to talk about just very briefly. The first is to thank everybody in the audience who came along with us on this journey. We're at Gramophone, we're super excited to be welcoming SVS on board, and we've been really thrilled with the products that we've unboxed for demo and put them out. So we're excited about that. And we're loving the fact that we're going to be able to give away some free SVS product this evening. So Hazen, if you can come on board with over the next minute or so, posting, there it is, the SVS Prime Wireless Pro Power.
Can I answer too, Joe? No, I'm just kidding.
Please, go ahead. Yeah, but being able to share, some free SVS product with our audience, that's just absolutely fabulous. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring that part of this evening's conversation. I want to thank both of you guys very sincerely and very wholeheartedly for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know how packed you are, especially with CEDIA right around the corner. So thank you so much for coming on board. I want to remind all of our listeners that you can go onto our website at gramophone.com at any point and find out a lot more information about SVS. And you can shop the SVS product and many of our other fine brands if you go to Sky by Gramophone, where you always get a secure checkout and fast and free shipping straight to your door. We want to be easy to buy from, and glad, of course, to have added SVS both to our in-store mix and our custom install mix, but also to our Sky by Gramophone mix. So, thanks to all of you for joining us. Let's see if there's any last items on the agenda here. One is that we've also put up, because, some folks might not be quite as comfortable, scanning to enter into the giveaway. We've put up the website link here so that you can see it, and that you can get on and qualify for the free giveaway that way. Yeah, thanks so much, Nick, and thanks so much, Gary, for joining us. And thanks to all of you who have joined us once again for another Gramophone Live. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Can't wait. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. It was really fun.
Thanks so much, Gary. Thanks so much, Nick. Bye-bye, everybody.
Happy listening.
You bet.